Ancient Norse society, which spanned from the Viking Age to the medieval period, had a reputation for its harsh punishments. Here are some of the most brutal punishments employed in ancient Norse society. Blood Eagle. The blood eagle is a punishment associated with Norse society, particularly during the Viking Age. Although there are some historical accounts and references to the blood eagle, it's important to note that its exact historical accuracy and prevalence are still debated among scholars. According to accounts that describe the blood eagle, it was a punishment reserved for individuals deemed guilty of particularly heinous crimes, usually related to treason or betrayal against their kin or ruler. The punishment involved a gruesome process that aimed to inflict extreme pain and humiliation. The procedure of the blood eagle began by carving an eagle shape into the back of the condemned individual, representing a symbolic association with Odin, the chief Norse god often associated with war and death. The details of the carving are not entirely clear from the historical sources, but it is described as a method of flaying or cutting the skin in a way that resembled the spread wings of an eagle. Following the carving, the executioner would proceed to break the ribs from the spine, carefully avoiding any vital organs to keep the condemned person alive for as long as possible. The ribs were then forcibly pulled outward, creating a gruesome display that resembled the wings of an eagle. It is said that the lungs still intact would be pulled out and draped over the exposed ribs, further enhancing the visual imagery. The macabre nature of the punishment aimed to deter acts of treason or betrayal and to demonstrate the brutal consequences that awaited those who committed such acts. While it was often mentioned in historical sagas and Norse literature, some scholars argue that it may have been an exaggerated or mythological concept rather than a widespread reality. The limited historical evidence and variations in the accounts of the punishments contribute to the ongoing debate surrounding its actual use in Norse society. Death by stabbing. Death by stabbing was a brutal punishment commonly employed in ancient Norse society, particularly for crimes such as murder or severe acts of violence. This form of punishment involved repeatedly stabbing the offender until they succumbed to their injuries, resulting in a gruesome and agonizing death. When an individual was found guilty of committing heinous crimes, particularly those involving the taking of another person's life, death by stabbing was often considered an appropriate and proportional form of punishment. The exact details and procedures of the punishment may have varied across different Norse communities and time periods, but the core principle remained the same: inflicting multiple stab wounds until the condemned person met their demise. The punishment of death by stabbing aimed to deliver a visceral and painful end to the offender's life. It was a deliberate act intended to exact vengeance and act as a deterrent to others who might contemplate similar acts of violence or murder. By subjecting the offender to a prolonged and torturous death, Norse society sought to demonstrate the severity of the crime committed and send a clear message about the consequences awaiting those who transgress the societal order. The execution of death by stabbing likely involved the use of various weapons, such as knives, swords, spears, depending on the resources and traditions of the particular Norse community. The method of stabbing could range from multiple puncture wounds to more systematic and prolonged attacks. While it may be viewed as brutal and inhumane by contemporary standards, it is within the historical framework of Norse society, acknowledging the differences between past and present perspectives on justice and punishment. Crushing. Crushing was a brutal punishment employed in ancient Norse society, specifically for cases of severe treason or rebellion. This form of punishment involved subjecting the offender to the weight and force of heavy stones or weights, resulting in a slow and agonizing death. When individuals were found guilty of acts deemed as grave betrayals and challenges to the established order, crushing was considered an extreme form of retribution. The purpose of this punishment was not only to end the offender's life, but also to inflict immense suffering and serve as a deterrent to others who might consider similar acts of treason or rebellion. The exact method of crushing could vary depending on the circumstances and available resources. In some instances, the condemned person's body would be placed beneath a large stone or heavy weights, which would gradually exert pressure and weight upon them over time. This slow process of crushing would cause excruciating pain and ultimately lead to their demise. It aimed to send a clear message about the consequences of challenging the authority or committing acts of treason. By subjecting individuals to such a horrific fate, Norse society sought to assert its power, maintain social order, and deter any potential threats to the established hierarchy. It's crucial to approach the topic of crushing with an understanding of the historical context and the differences in societal values and norms. Keel howling. Keel howling was a brutal maritime punishment employed in various historical contexts, including some accounts within Norse society. This punishment involved dragging the offender underneath a ship across the keel and then bringing them up on the other side. The process was intended to cause severe injuries, including lacerations, and even potentially lead to drowning. When individuals committed serious offenses at sea such as mutiny, theft, or acts of defiance, keel hauling was used as a harsh disciplinary measure. The punishment was designed to inflict pain, humiliation, and serve as a deterrent to others on board the ship. The process of keel hauling involved tying the offender with ropes, often their arms and legs, and then dragging them beneath the ship's hull. The individual would be forced to endure the rough surface of the keel, which was typically encrusted with barnacles and other sharp marine growths. As the offender was pulled beneath the vessel, they would suffer from cuts, abrasions, and potential injuries caused by the harsh contact with the keel. The severity of the punishment varied depending on factors such as the length of the haul, the speed of the ship, and the conditions at sea. In some cases, the punishment could be fatal if the individual drowned, sustained severe injuries, or could not withstand the physical strain of the ordeal. The punishment was intended to instill fear among the crew, maintain discipline, and reinforce the hierarchy and power structure on board the ship. It's important to note that the historical accuracy and prevalence of keel hauling in Norse society specifically can be challenging to determine due to limited and fragmented sources. However, the punishment was utilized in various maritime cultures throughout history, highlighting the brutal nature of discipline at sea during certain periods. Banishment. Banishment was a severe form of punishment employed in ancient Norse society. Although it may not have entailed physical brutality, it carried significant consequences for the individual subjected to it. Banishment involved the expulsion of an individual from their community, forcing them to live in exile and fend for themselves in harsh environments with limited resources. When individuals committed serious offenses or violated societal norms, banishment was seen as a way to remove them from the social fabric of the community. It was a form of social exile, effectively cutting off all ties and support systems that the individual had within their community. The process of banishment typically involved a formal decision made by the community's leaders or legal authorities. The offender would be declared an outcast and formally expelled from their village or settlement. They'd be denied access to communal resources, protection, and assistance from their former community members. The severity of banishment lay in its isolating and survival-related challenges. Exiled individuals were left to navigate unfamiliar and often hostile territories with limited provisions or support networks. They had to find ways to procure food, shelter, and safety on their own, all while being cut off from their familiar social structures. Banishment not only carried physical hardships but also carried significant emotional and psychological consequences. The individual faced the loss of their home, family, and community ties. They experienced profound isolation and the stigma of being an outcast. While banishment may not have involved the physical brutality of other punishments, its long-term effects on the individual's well-being, survival, and mental state should not be underestimated. It served as a means to enforce social order, remove individuals who were deemed a threat, and discourage others from engaging in similar behavior. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting content.